The reading is taken from 1 John 1 to 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for that reading. We'll come back to that a little later. I'm going to start by telling you a story. Once upon a time, a long time ago in a land far away, there was a rabbi, and he was part of a very orthodox, very observant Jewish community. And he was a wonderful rabbi, and he was very well thought of by all the people. And they all tried desperately hard to keep all the laws of Moses. They even ring-fenced them with other laws in order to try not to break the original ones. And this man, this rabbi, he was the best of the lot. He kept them really, really well. And he was very wise. He taught very good teaching, and he began to build up a real band of disciples. And they thought, began to think, that he must be the Messiah. They didn't believe Jesus was the Messiah. They'd decided they didn't do Jesus, but they did believe that God was going to send a Messiah. And they started to believe that this man was the Messiah. But he was very old, and he gradually got quite frail, and it seemed that he was going to die. And they didn't believe that the Messiah could die. They thought he would live forever. And so they got a bit worried about this man, and they got all these other Jewish people around the world who believed the same as them to start praying that he wouldn't die. But he did. And then they thought he would rise from the dead, because they found some scriptures that indicated that the Messiah would die and would rise from the dead. So they prayed he would rise. They even put off his funeral, because normally Jewish funerals take place within 48 hours of death. They put it off for a bit in case he would rise. But he didn't. So I started off by telling you something that wasn't quite true, which was a bit naughty of me. But it wasn't that long ago. It was in the 1980s, and he actually died in 1994. And it wasn't that terribly far away either. It was in New York. And as far as I know, his remains are still in a cemetery somewhere in New York. He never did rise again. And yet people still believe that he could have been the Messiah. Sorry, this is annoying me. I can't see people over there. So, they never asked one very important question, which was, how do you know who is the Messiah? Well, you have to look at the scriptures, don't you? To start with, did you know how many prophecies there are concerning the Messiah in the Old Testament? Anybody got any ideas? Sorry?
About 100 something?
No. 330. And the chances of one person, I haven't worked this out, I can tell you my maths isn't up to it at all, but the chances of one person accidentally fulfilling all those prophecies is 1 in 83 billion. Okay, I don't know if you can get your head around that. I can't really, but I know it's more or less, it's impossible. I mean, some of them are to do with where the Messiah would be born. You don't choose where you're going to be born, do you? We were all born in different places, and I don't suppose any of us actually had any choice about it. So that was one question they needed to ask, and they didn't ask. So we're going to have a look at how Messiah actually fulfills some of these prophecies. And in order to do that, we look at the Gospels. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the Gospels. When I was at school, I did A-level, RE or I, or whatever it was called in those days. It changes its name every so often. Religious instruction, religious education, whatever it was, but anyway, that's what I did. And we did the Gospels as part of that course. And I was taught that Matthew, Mark and Luke all took their information from the same source. And that source was called Q, which is the initial of the German word Quelle, which means a source or a spring of water. And that they all took their information from this one source. But things I've been reading recently, I'm not quite sure that was completely true. It may have a partial truth. Mark seems to have been the first gospel to be written, and he doesn't give us a birth story about Jesus. He leaps in straight with the baptism. And it's possible that he took a lot of his information from Simon Peter, because he spent a lot of time with Peter after the death and resurrection of Jesus. He worked with Barnabas and Paul, but then he left them and went to work with Peter. So he may have taken a lot of what he wrote in his gospel from what Peter told him. Then we come to Matthew. Matthew's gospel was written primarily to show that Jesus is the Messiah and that he is the King of the Jews. And we're coming back to Matthew in a moment. And a lot of his teaching is about the kingdom of heaven, which was very important to the Jews. Luke concentrates more on what the Gentiles might be interested in. He possibly was a Gentile convert to Judaism, nobody's quite sure. And he includes a lot more about women and children than the others. And John, although we don't have a birth story in John, we do have that wonderful passage right at the beginning. He may well have been a cousin of Jesus. They think that Salome was possibly Mary's sister. So they may have spent, Jesus and John may have spent a lot of time together even when they were younger. We don't know. But he also wanted to show Jesus as Messiah and the Son of God, and through his teaching. So if you can grab a Bible, you might find it quite a good idea to have a look. And we're going to start off with Matthew chapter 1. There are Bibles around if you do want one. It doesn't matter, you don't have to have one. Matthew starts off straight off with the book of the ancestry or genealogy of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One. I'm reading from the Amplified, so it might be slightly different from that. The son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it goes into the genealogy. Abraham, father of Isaac, father of Jacob, father of Judah and his brothers, and so forth. He starts with Abraham, because Abraham was the one chosen to be the father of the Jewish people, through whom the Messiah would come to the world. And Matthew includes women in his genealogy, which was very untraditional. So we have Tamar early on, and then we have Rahab. Now Rahab was the mother of Boaz. I don't know if you read genealogies normally. Do you skip them in the Old Testament? Peggy says no, she doesn't, but I think a lot of people probably do. But there you go, Rahab, Canaanite woman, and yet she was the mother of Boaz, who was the father of Obed, and Obed's mother was Ruth. And she was a Moabitess, so there weren't even Jewish women. And then, of course, Obed was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And so it goes on until it comes down to Jesus. Quite a long way down, isn't it? Verse 16. But we have a problem here, because this is Joseph's line, or it looks as if it's Joseph's line. And Joseph wasn't actually the father of Jesus, was he? So how do we fix this? Well, if you look at verse 16, it says, Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus. And that, if you know the background to this, is indicative that actually he was not the father. It was Mary that was father. Mary, this is Mary's line, beg your pardon. But there's still a bit of a problem in this genealogy, because if you look in verse 11, it says Josiah became the father of Jeconiah, who's also called Coniah or Jehoiakim. A bit confusing, but if you look at the history of that in Kings and Chronicles, Jeconiah was such an evil, evil king that God said none of his descendants would ever sit on the throne of David again. And that actually is in Jeremiah. Although the history is in Chronicles, Jeremiah tells us this particular part. And it's in Jeremiah 36, verse 30, that none of his descendants could sit on the throne of David. So there's a bit of a problem really with this line. So maybe it was Joseph's line. I hope I'm not confusing you too much, but we have to have a look at all these things. You can't ignore them because they're there. So let's go to Luke, because we have a different... So what Matthew was really trying to show was that Jesus, Messiah, or the Messiah had to be the son of Abraham and the son of David, because he had to be able to sit on the throne. But he didn't really quite achieve it with that. But Luke does. And in Luke we start in chapter 3 and verse 23. And he starts the other way round. He doesn't start from the way back and then work up to Jesus. He starts actually with Jesus. And it says Jesus himself, when he began his ministry, was about 30 years of age. being the son, as was supposed, of Joseph, the son of Heli. Now, saying as was supposed means that he wasn't actually Joseph's son. He doesn't mention Mary, but it means that. And something I was reading just yesterday says that in Jewish genealogies, normally each person would have the word the definite article, in front of them. So if I was looking around here, I would say the Dorothy, the Phil, the Christabel. And that's how they were written. But if they left that definite article out, then it meant that it was actually the other half of the couple who the line was running through. Do you see what I mean? So in this case, if it had been in one of those languages, it wouldn't have said the Joseph, it would have just said Joseph, as it does in English. But it's very difficult in our language to actually put those little nuances in. So anyway, if you look at this line and assume that it's Mary's line, you go right back to verse 31, and it's there, the son of David who is mentioned is Nathan. In the Matthew genealogy is Solomon. So the line that Matthew was drawing is the one that goes back to Solomon. This one goes back to Nathan. And it doesn't go through Jeconiah. But Luke had another reason for writing, and he takes this line much further back. He goes back to Abraham, but then he keeps on going, and he goes right the way back to Adam. Goes through Noah and Methuselah and Enoch and Seth back to Adam, because he wants to say Messiah has to be the Son of Man, which was one of the titles that Jesus used of himself. Son of Man came to seek and save those who were lost. But he goes even further, because he says that Adam was the Son of God. So there you have 4 sonships of the Messiah. Son of Abraham, Son of David, Son of Man, and Son of God. These are, as far as people know, the only existing genealogies that can show who the Messiah is. If Rabbi Schneerson, that was his name, the man I was talking about at the beginning, if they'd really put in a claim for him to be Messiah, they would not have been able to prove it, because all the old genealogies were destroyed when the temple was destroyed, because they were all in the archives there. So, apart from what's in the Bible, there are no genealogies. And the genealogies between the end of the Old Testament, the end of Malachi, and the beginning of the New, which covers 400 years, so quite a lot of generations, that's all missing. Nobody can prove that. These are the only 2 that exist. And also, if you have somebody now, and I mean, Schneerson wasn't that long ago, wanting to prove it, they've got to trace their genealogy right back from now back to the time of Jesus, and to fit in with what's in here. And I think you'd be hard pushed to find a Jewish person who could do that, because of what's happened to the Jews. I mean, could any of us? You get the odd person on Who Do You Think You Are, or something like that, they can take back to William the Conqueror, like they did with Alexander Armstrong and others, but they don't do it with many, and certainly not with the Jewish ones. I watched the one with Matt Lucas on Thursday night, and they could only go back about 3 generations, because his relatives were nearly all lost in the Holocaust. Many, many Russian Jews were lost in pogroms, and all their information, all their birth records and everything. It's all gone. So there's only one way of proving who the Messiah actually is, and that's in our New Testament. So it has to be Jesus. God doesn't make mistakes. He knew that those things were going to be destroyed and that nothing was going to be able to be proved after that. And nobody else would ever be able to prove that they could be the Messiah. But I just want to take you back one step further, and that's with the reading that Phil read for us earlier from John 1. And I'm going to read just one paragraph from this booklet, which is by our old friend Chris Hill. And it's all about those first verses of John's Gospel. And I have got permission, just in case this is being recorded. It does say in the back of the book you must get permission if you want to use it. So I rang Chris and I got permission. And by the way, he sends his love to everybody who would like to have it. And he says, he talks about the two genealogies that we've just discussed, and then he says, but John pushes the line back much further than that. He pushes it into eternity past. You cannot go back any further than John goes back. In the beginning was the Word, or as it can be translated, in the beginning the Word already was. The phrase in the beginning is non-specific. It does not pinpoint a definite moment. John does not say, in the beginning the Word came into being. The Word was already there when the very beginning began. John is showing us under inspiration from heaven that the Word has never not existed. He has always been. Some of the life groups are covering the I ams of Jesus. And in Hebrew, you can't say I am. There's no present tense of the verb to be. So you can only say I. So Jesus knew exactly who he was. He was I. So it was I, the Good Shepherd, I, the light of the world, and so forth. And then, to me, that sounds stronger, actually, than saying I am. And you can't do it. There's a lot of language, apparently, that don't have the present sense of the verb to be, which you may or may not know. I didn't until I started to read stuff for this, but there you go. I. Jesus knew who he was.